All governments are focused on economic growth, but they don't seem to solve the problems that growth is designed to address. So what's going on here? Must the economy keep on growing, or is there another way? So to answer this question, we need to understand that there are three economies going on all at the same time. And the first of those is the material economy, the economy that we probably think we're most familiar with. This is the economy of things. It's the economy of food and drink and clothing and all sorts of things that we want and need to improve the quality of our lives. Telephones and cars and 1,000,001 other things. All sorts of consumer things and consumer services like haircuts and makeup and that sort of thing. As I say, 1,000,001 things that we want to have in our lives of a material nature. And this material economy is really important. It's what keeps us alive. We really need this stuff. We need food and drink and clothing. Maybe things that we don't need so much, but if they really improve the quality of our lives, then yeah, it's fine that we need and want those things. And we also need to observe that there are millions of people in the UK and in America and across the world who don't have enough of these things. There are millions of children in the UK living in poverty, living in deprivation, going to bed hungry very often. Millions of families who are dependent upon support, dependent upon food banks, people in work who can't earn enough for a decent standard of living. And across the world, of course, there are billions of people in that situation too. So the material economy is not the villain of the piece here. The material economy needs to grow. It needs to grow to meet the needs and reasonable expectations for a good standard of living of people across the globe. It's not something that shouldn't be growing. Now, there are many, many ways in which it could grow much more efficiently and much less destructively in relation to the environment, for example. The material economy could be much more localized. There needs to be much less of stuff charging across the globe in an unnecessary way. It needs to be much closer to home. There's many more things that we could do for ourselves or make for ourselves or produce for ourselves or within our communities. There are 101 ways of making the material economy more sustainable, less wasteful, and ensuring that it doesn't have the sort of environmentally damaging effects that we know it can have. But we mustn't make the material economy the villain of this conversation, because it is really important. It is what makes people's lives more enjoyable in many ways. And that leads on to the second economy, which is even more important on that level, and that's what I call the human economy, the economy of human value. Now, this is the economy of our relationships, the economy of a good night's sleep, of going for a walk, reading a book, spending time with our children, cooking a meal for the family. You might think, well, is that an economy? What's that got to do with the economy? Am I using the words correctly here? And I would say yes, because anything that improves the quality of our life, which has value, we need to think of that value as an economic good, because otherwise we'll lose track of it. We need to realize that conditions have to be right for us to be able to do those things. We need to have time off without feeling that we can't afford to take time off. We need to have time to rest. We need to have time to recover from a week's work. We need to have time to look after our health. All those things are beneficial. They create well-being in our lives, and as such, they are an economic good. So we're not trivializing, for example, relationships by calling them economic, because if I feel happier, my partner potentially feels happier. If I feel happier, my neighbor feels happier, all that sort of thing. These things are real goods in our lives. And we need to see that the economy does actually help to provide them. If we don't have a house to live in, if we don't have clothes to wear, if we can't afford to eat, then we are not going to feel the benefit of those sorts of goods. So that's the material and the human economies. And the material economy can and must grow, but there are limits to its growth. We know from masses of research and also from our own personal experience that there is a limit to what people want to and can consume. There comes a point at which people don't want really to put an awful lot more effort into having more stuff or more money coming in so they can buy more stuff. There comes a point when people really want to transfer their interest from the material economy to the human economy. They want to spend their time more focusing on relationships or having time to themselves or spending time with their family or whatever it might be, or going for a walk or that sort of thing, looking after their health. People do have limits in general on what they want to consume materially. So yes, in that sense, the material economy is self-limiting. As I say, there comes a point where you can stop producing because you've got enough, or you carry on producing enough just to keep topping things up or whatever it might be. But it's not continual growth of an exponential nature. So that's the material economy. The human economy can grow pretty much infinitely if we allow it, because the human economy is sort of self-generating. There's nothing being consumed to make the human economy grow. It can grow of itself because there's no material input to it. So there's no environmental impact on the growth of the human economy. Nothing bad that can happen because the human economy is growing. It can grow, as I say, as much as it possibly can. And indeed, we would like our institutions to be structured in such a way that they encourage the human economy to grow as much as possible. So that's all fine. Those are not the issue here. The issue is all with the third economy, which is the financial economy. The financial economy, the economy of money, the economy that we measure with this thing called GDP, gross domestic product, which measures effectively the turnover of money in the economy, the transactions where money changes hands. So if I buy something for £2 and sell it for £4, I've generated £2 worth of profit, and that's £2 worth of GDP. And I can do that even if I've actually added no real value to that thing at all, which is quite possible. So if I'm sitting at a trading desk in the City of London and I'm trading, I'm trading currencies, and I'm making a little bit of money as I do so, then that little bit of money I'm making will contribute to GDP, even though I haven't actually created any wealth at all. I've just taken a profit by moving some documents from one side of the table to the other, or some buttons on a keyboard or whatever it might be. So there's masses of activity in the economy which is like that. The British economy is one of the most financialised in the world. The financial aspect of the British economy is far, far bigger than in many other countries, partly because at least the British economy is so old. And as economies get older, generally speaking, they become more financialised. More and more activity is put into making money out of money and less into producing stuff. And so to answer the question, the financial economy can grow forever. It can grow on growing and growing and growing because there's no limit to the number of financial transactions that we can do. So that's how the financial economy works. It creates the impression that wealth is being created by the turnover of money. In other words, it's using money as a proxy for wealth. It's saying money is wealth, and the more money we turn over and can be acquired in one or other part of the economy, the richer we're becoming. The effect of this is that the money concentrates in the hands of people who've already got money. And the government's solution to that is quite simple. It says, well, we're going to tax those people, and we're going to take that money away, and we're going to use it to distribute to other people through education and health services and benefits and that sort of thing, in order to redress the balance and get the money back from where it's all being stored away and spread it around a bit. That's what taxation fundamentally is for. And that's fine. It's interesting to note that under the current Conservative government, we have the highest taxes since the Second World War. And that's because we have the highest levels of inequality, probably since certainly the 1970s. That is to say that because the money is all now stuck in the hands of wealthier people, the government has to tax more in order to get it back. But it doesn't really do that because you can never quite do enough. You can never really get enough back, because the system is constantly pushing the money back up the system towards the people who've already got money. So what's going on here? Why doesn't this work? Well, it doesn't work because money, as I say, is not a proxy for wealth. Money is not the output of the economy. It's a complete mistelling of the narrative or story of the economy. It's a complete mistelling of that story to say that businesses and companies and corporations and people beaver away, they create activities and they make money, and the government collects that money and spends it on taxes. That's not what's happening. What's happening is the government is putting money into the economy. All the money comes initially from the government. The government creates the money in a sort of computerized sort of way. It puts the money into the economy, and it goes to people, and often to these big businesses and that sort of thing, who then use it to acquire more money. So money is an input into the economy. The money is the input which allows economic activity to happen. It is not an output of the economy. And that's a crucial distinction. And that's the way in which the story has been told. The story has been told wrong all the way through this. We need to tell a story of money as being the thing which allows wealth to be created, not a story of money being wealth that can be taken out of the system in the way that we currently are encouraged to imagine. And when we change that narrative, when we look at it from the point of view of money as being a thing that you put into the system, then we can see why the whole taxation thing doesn't really work, because the money is going into the wrong place in the first place. In other words, if you want to make the system work better, you don't give all the money to wealthy people and then try and take it away and give it back to other people. What you do is make sure it doesn't all go to wealthy people in the first place. That means you have to put it somewhere else in the first place. And that means putting it into the economy in a different way. Now, if you look at this graph, you'll see that the vast majority of bank lending at the moment either goes into property or it goes into financial activity. Hardly any of it goes into the making and doing economy, the economy of stuff, the economy that creates things that improve the quality of our lives. And you might say, well, that's just the banks, so they're looking after their own interests, they're not doing the right thing. But remember, that money has all come from the government. The banks are not lending, in effect, their own money. They're effectively lending money on behalf of the government. The government puts the money into the system, the banks are able to lend it, and they lend it where they think it will make the most significant financial return, both for their clients and for themselves. And the government is happy with that because, as I say, the government is measuring the economy in terms of financial turnover, and you'll get more financial turnover if you go to those parts of the money economy. But if you want to grow the real economy, if you want to grow the material economy and the human economy, which together make the real economy, if you like, then you need to put that money directly where it can do the most productive good. And very often that means putting the money into the hands of people, of you and me, and people who can use that money to generate real wealth in our own lives in efficient ways that don't involve vast quantities of international trade and all the rest of it. There's research that shows that people growing vegetables in their allotments are at least as productive as big-scale farmers. You get at least as much per acre out of an allotment as you do out of an enormous field. Now, the problem with that is that people growing plants in their allotment are not generating any money activity to speak of. There may be a little bit of money going into it in terms of buying seeds and that sort of thing, but they're probably working for free, and they're certainly not selling their products for huge amounts of money. They're all staying very local. The whole thing is a very low money activity, if you like. So the value of it is not being measured in the economy. Whereas some great field, acres and acres of field, with a huge great tractor running through it, whether it's in this country or elsewhere, is generating significant amounts of financial activity. Everything's got to be paid for. You've got wages, you've got tractors, you've got vast acreages of land. So those sorts of agriculture are creating money transactions, money turnover, which is making the economy grow. And if you're bringing all that food in from abroad, if you're using ships to bring it in, then those ships are creating money activity, money transactions. All the money that's made on the markets of the trading of these food products is creating money transactions. This huge amount of transactional activity in the food chain, which is creating GDP, appearing to make the economy bigger. And none of that will show up if you're growing food on your allotment. So that's an example of the way in which the financial economy and the material economy are completely at odds. We can have a very, very effective functioning material economy, but it needs money as an input, and the money is not going there, the money is going into financial transactions. And so the financial economy will grow, as I say, and can grow pretty much forever. And we've seen an enormous amount of growth in the financial economy over the last 20, 30 years. And we've seen where that value has all gone. I mean, here's another little graph which shows what's happened in the last 10 years. So you can see there that the line across the bottom, which are essentially people's earnings, the sort of typical median earnings, haven't moved at all in 10 years, and yet the wealth that's been accumulated in the economy has gone shooting up. If we were able to direct that money towards the material economy, then we'd probably see wages increasing, we'd see people's material wealth increasing, and we wouldn't see that massive great increase in financial wealth, which is held by a relatively small number of people. So where does that leave us? Well, first of all, as I say, we need to change the narrative of the economy so that money is seen as the input that creates wealth rather than as the output of the economy. And that's absolutely crucial, because when we do that, we change the way we measure the economy too. And instead of measuring all this financial turnover and activity as GDP does, we start measuring the real productive wealth represented by the material economy and by the human economy. We start measuring, have we got the stuff that we need to live our lives, and do we feel good in our lives? Are we having the time off that we need, have the rest that we need? How are our relationships? Are we spending time with our families? Are we going for walks? Are we looking after our health? Are we breathing fresh air? All that sort of thing. Those things are what the economy should be trying to produce more of. And if we measured it based on those things, then the government would be focused on producing more of those sort of things in the economy, because that's how governments work. They work to objectives, they work to targets. So if we say that the outcome we want to achieve is the maximizing of our material and our human wealth, and we measure that, then that's the way that policy will be directed. And that means in particular that the government has to put money into the system in a different way. It needs to put money where it can most likely produce real human and material wealth. And that means getting it as close as possible to individuals and communities who can do that for themselves. Now that's a neat lead into the next question that we'll be talking about in Bonkers Economics, which is, why is the government so opposed to the universal basic income? What is the universal basic income in the first place, and why isn't it a policy that the government is pursuing? So that's coming up soon on Bonkers Economics. In the meantime, please do subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, please click the like button, because that makes a big difference in getting the message out. And I'll look forward to talking to you again soon.